All right, so this is going to be our hand composition. And you can see how simple this one's going to be. Okay, nothing too crazy in here. So we're going to hit R to read in our footage. And if I go and find my hand stuff, images, okay, we have the checkerboard and we have the SSS. Okay, now if we look at these, now if I look at the icon for this, I can see that this one has the red, green, blue, and the alpha channel here, as does this one. But this one has a little green thing here, and that indicates that this guy has a little something extra to it. So if I click on him and hit 1, I go to this, that's where our AO is stored. And this is where our depth is stored. Okay, if I crank this like that, I can actually start to see some of that depth that's in there. Okay. So I know that this is the one that's going to house that stuff. So even if you forgot from Maya, you can still look at the icon and say, okay, this is the one that's going to house some of that extra stuff. Or if you were to get a file from someone else, you could always look at that and say, okay, well, this is the one that that they gave me that has the extra stuff in there, and you can look at it and see what it is. All right, so what we're going to do is first we're going to look at our end result. There's our end result. And I'm going to take this one and I'm going to merge in the alpha channel, okay? Or not the alpha, the ambient occlusion. So I'm just going to click down here, so I don't have anything selected, and hit M for merge. And I'm going to click A to this, B to that, okay? So A is going to this image, B is going to that image. I'm going to click on the merge and hit 1, okay? So right now what's happening is it's just taking that checkerboard and placing it atop the hand. That's not what we want. We want the ambient occlusion to be multiplied on top of it. So I'm going to go over to my operation and change this to multiply. Okay. So now what's happening is it's multiplying the checkerboard onto the hand. We don't want that. So if I look down here where it says A channel and B channel, I can specify that I want my A channel to be the ambient occlusion. Because this one has an ambient occlusion output, I can use that. Okay, so right now it's multiplying the ambient occlusion by the RGB of B. Okay, so if I were to disable that, just hitting D on that multiply, you can see the difference there. Okay, and we can use this mixer if, for some reason it came in too dark. We can always pull this mixer down or pull the mixer up to change the amount of ambient occlusion we're getting. We could also hit G to add a grade node and drop it. I'm just moving it right onto the A. And instead of me choosing the RGB, again, I would choose the ambient occlusion as what I want to adjust. And then I could adjust the ambient occlusion pass that we're dealing with here. Okay? So there's lots of stuff that we can do even after we're out of Maya to kind of play with this. All right? So this is our ambient occlusion. So I'm just going to double click this and just call this AO mult. Ambient occlusion multiply. And that way I know it's ambient occlusion multiply. Okay. Now if you also look at this, it says AO mult multiply. So maybe I don't even need this mult. I can just do ambient occlusion. There you go. Now I know it's multiply because it says multiply. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the checkerboard. Okay, so I'm going to go and merge again. So I click off and merge, and I'm going to say, okay, this is my A, this is my B. We want to keep it nice, so I'm going to hold Control, drag this little dot. There we go. And then let's view that. So I click on that and hit 1. Okay, now this is going and doing an over just like we had before. I don't want to just do it over, I want to do a plus. Okay, and a plus will simply just add the pixels from one to the other. Okay, now if you hold your mouse just for fun, there you go, hold our mouse over there, you can see a listing of all the things that it's doing. And if you look down to over, it's adding A plus B, and that's using the alpha channel in there as well, whereas plus is simply just using A plus B. Okay, and that's why we're using it, so we don't mix in the alpha. And you see we do get a difference between over right there and plus, because if we hit A over here, we get an alpha channel, right? So now I don't want this effect to be exactly like this. I want it to be a little bit toned down. So that's where I can use this mix and just kind of blend it on there as much as I want. And if I go back to this guy and I go back to this one, I'm pretty close to where I was. Maybe a little bit brighter. There we go. There we go. Okay. So there is that. Now, if we look at this icon again, you'll see we have now a little X above it. Okay. The second I took that mix and pulled it down, that X appeared. Okay. So Nuke is very efficient in how it kind of signifies that stuff is happening in here. So with this X, you'll see that someone who has never seen this before is saying, okay, what do we have here? All right, they multiply the ambient occlusion. They did a little mixing here. Okay, so I can adjust that mixing to see where that's coming from. So I'm going to double click this also and just rename this. So this will be Checkerboard, and that's where we're plussing that on. Okay, now we're going to copy in the Z depth so we can do our depth of field. So I'm going to hit Tab, not Tab, I'm going to hit K for copy. I'm going to click my A into here, click my B into this. Make sure things are lined up, use the control key, drag a nice little line there, and then 1 to view it. Okay, now right now it's copying the alpha into the alpha. We don't want that. We want to copy the cam Z depth perspective 1, whatever yours is named, into the depth.z. And we'll rename this copy depth. Okay, and you'll see even on here, it's showing you what it's copying. It's copying the cam Z depth perspective 1.z to the depth.z. Okay, it's a very smart system. All right, so now we'll go in and hit Tab and add a Z defocus. Okay, now you have to be in, if I go to Help About Nuke, you have to be in version 7 to get this Z defocus. If you open up 6 by accident, the Z defocus will not be there. Save your scene, reopen it up with 7, and right now I'm on 708. Okay, so we get two things. We get a filter and we get the image. Okay, I want to use the image input into that. Let me make sure it's nice and snapped. We'll view that. And it's going to go crazy blurry. Okay, we have to adjust our focus point. And we want to keep the focus point pretty much near the camera. Okay, and it's going to take some time. It's going to be a little bit slow while it calculates this. Okay, so you can see the amount of depth of field we have on this piece by just choosing a point up here. I'm actually going to knock this down some. I'm going to take this, maybe the maximum down to 5 and the size down to, let's say, 2. Okay, now I know it was working because this thing here, whenever we're using or it's updating, this thing will be highlighted. Okay, so now we can set a couple keys in here. So first thing I want to do is rewind. So I'm going to hit the rewind button. And you'll see that my hand's going to adjust back down to here, because that's where my start frame was. So I'm going to move my focus point down to my fingertip. You'll see the thing came up. I'm going to right click on, not focus point, okay? This is just kind of like a sample thing, like an eyedropper. You can't set keyframes on this. You right click, no animation. So I'm going to right click on focus plane and set a key. The focus plane is what's actually setting that key up. Okay? And then I'm going to go to the end. So I'm going to use this arrow. Move my focus point up here. I don't need to right click and set another key in here. Nuke uses an auto key system. So the second I change something, it automatically sets a key. So then I'm also going to go into the middle, 48 or 47. Doesn't really matter if I'm exact. And then I'm going to move my focus point back down there. Okay. So now I can rewind this and I can preview it. Before I do that, though, I want to go look at my result, my output here, and change this to the focal plane setup. Okay, and that way I can see what's in focus. There's the blue. What's not in focus, or where the depth is starting to happen. And I'm just going to adjust my depth of field a little bit, just to give myself a little bit more softness inside those areas. Okay, I don't need to key this. I could, but I don't need to. Okay, if I go up to 47 now, and look at where that depth of field is. Maybe I'd want that a little bit bigger, right? Let's go to the end, and there it is again. Okay, so let's say that I wanted to keyframe that as well. So I can just right click on depth of field and say set key, go up to my next keyframe, pull this up some, go to my next keyframe, and it's already up because of the keyframe that was there, but I could also increase it maybe a little bit more. Okay, and then I'll change this back to result. Alright, so now I'll rewind it and I'll preview it. Now it might take some time for me to preview this because it's calculating all that stuff that we did inside that chain in order for this to happen. So I'm not going to go terribly quickly through this. I can literally just kind of pop in. You want to go through that and make sure you do. Look at the rendering of it. Okay, some of these key shots like this where we're really close to there, I may want to just jump on the focal plane setup and just make sure I'm still good, which I am. Okay, and you'll see I'm not getting any blue in here. Okay, and that might be just maybe move my focal point there a little bit. Actually, surprised I'm not getting any blue. There it is. So by just adjusting this focus plane, that focal point obviously wasn't terribly accurate. It was coming in, so that I can take this depth of field down some. There we go. I'm going to go to the end and do the same thing. Now I can also delete a key. If I get to the end and I say, oh, I don't want that keyframe there, I can right click and just say delete key. Right click and say delete key. Now that doesn't delete the animation, it just deletes the keyframe that was on there. Okay, and I can even preview it like this to see if that thing drops off. So maybe here I'll also go in and just adjust that thing. Pull that down. There we go. Okay, so let's take this back to result. And then we can just check it out at some of our keyframes. Maybe I'll add a little bit more size to this, maybe 4 and 8. There we go. So now that looks pretty good there. We have nice depth of field in there. We're crisp clear. We drop off the background. Had we rendered out a wireframe pass, here's where it gets kind of creative. Is do you want the wireframe to happen before you blur it, or do you want to have the wireframe on afterwards? Okay, so you could also add that in here too if you had a wireframe, or if you did like we did in some of the other ones where you broke down those individual channels and then put them back together and adjusted them. We could do that as well. Okay, let's move that back. So now we're just going to add a right node in here, right, and we'll put this into our home desktop D drive, Sarcoma 2520 work hand, and I'm just going to make a new folder called render out. Nuke. And we'll label it down here and call this hand render dot pound dot TIF. It's going to render this out. We hit render. Here's our input range 1 through 96, so we know that we've done that right. So we hit OK, and now it's going to render it out into a sequence that we could then bring into After Effects. Okay. So once this sequence is done, it'll take about 5 minutes or so. We'll bring this back into After Effects. All right, so we're done rendering outside of Nuke. So let's go into After Effects and double click in here. And let's go find our footage. It's going to be in 2520, work, and render out from Nuke. Here's our first footage file, open. Ignore the alpha channel, hit OK. We're going to right click, interpret the footage main. and set this to 24 frames per second. I'm going to drag this onto the new comp button. And then when we hit play, we can see what it looks like. You can see that looks pretty neat. Nice depth of field back here, crispy clear right there. Okay, so then we can just go to composition, add to render queue, or composition make movie, or file export, add to render queue. Depending on the version you're in, this is version 6, version 5, CS5 is a little bit different. You may get a pop-up screen, just hit save. Then we're going to click on the word lossless. We're going to change our format to QuickTime. Change our format options to video codec H.264, right there. Make sure this is all the way up. These are unchecked. Okay, okay. Output 2, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to make sure I name this hand underscore Sarcona underscore 2520 underscore fall 13. Okay. Name of the project, your name, the class, and the semester. Render. And there it is. And if we come into that folder, there it is. We'll notice that our blacks are not truly black. There it is. This actually looks like it's a little bit washed out. Okay, and that's just something that happens inside of QuickTime when you save it as an H.264. So with QuickTime Pro, you're going to go to Window, Show Movie Properties. You're going to go to Video Track, Visual Settings, change this transparency down here to Blend, and then pull it all the way up to 100. Change this Blend to Straight Alpha. Close the window. And then now, if we click and drag, there we go. Now it's nice and neat the way it should be. Okay? So now we can go to File, Save, and we're good. Now, there's ways that you can't just export the subsurface scattering out as layers just to say, you know, I want to render it out as the color paths and the specular paths and all these other ones. You have to do some more workarounds. So you can see on this one, the specular is actually a bit brighter than I would want. So if I wanted to, there are ways to do that inside of Maya, okay, where we can actually separate the front scatter, the back scatter, the diffuse, and the specular into separate passes and composite those together. But in this case, we didn't do that. In this case, it's not terribly bad. Okay. There we go. Okay, so that's it. So you're going to turn in your hand movie, and then I would also like to see your hand file. Okay, so you're going to turn this in, and then you're also going to turn in. Where is my desktop? That 20 work, hand, scenes. All I need is your last file, okay? But make sure you label it with your name, Sarcona final hand. Okay, so Sarcona final hand, and then I turn this in and turn that QuickTime movie in, and then we're good with the hand project.